The impact of Brexit on logistics is the topic of my conversation today with Susan Boylan. She is Director Analyst with the Logistics Strategy and Operations team at Gartner. Hello, Susan. How are you?
Hello, Rob. I'm good. I'm really good today. Thank you.
There's several key areas that I want to explore with you in the few minutes that we have together with regard to the impact of Brexit on logistics and trade and the like. I want to start with tariffs and taxes. That's a big one, right? All of a sudden, there's going to be a big surprise by companies that were not prepared for this. But just give me a rough sense of how that world is going to change.
The real issue, I suppose, is, when the agreement came to be on the 24th of December, it was hailed as a free trade agreement, and there was palpable size of relief across, organizations, not just logistics, not just freight forwarding, but shippers also thinking, okay, we've avoided that nasty, thorny issue of tariffs and trades. Unfortunately, the rule of origin is an area that's caught a lot of organizations out in terms of trades and tariffs, and therefore you now have to classify your products by their rules of origin and make sure that they qualify for these preferential tariffs and taxes that have come out as part of the free trade agreement. The issue here, Rob, is complexity of product. Okay, so if it's a straightforward bought in finished goods, it's fairly easily handled. If you're transforming it to a certain degree, depending on the components of the product, it may or may not qualify for the preferential tariffs within the free trade agreement. Some products are actually classified by the gov.uk website as hard to classify items. Footwear, automotive, chemical products, anything with any kind of synthesis is going to be very, very difficult to classify correctly, with absolute traceability and understanding where your products have come from. So while organizations were delighted that the free trade agreement had been struck, the onion peeling element of this Brexit deal, or this move now into the UK no longer being part of the EU, has caught an awful lot of, particularly food suppliers, because they were particularly perishable food suppliers. They were hit first and hardest because they're moving product in a swifter way rather than buffering stock. So as stocks are depleted, more and more organizations are going to be faced with the rule of origin challenge. Okay. So it's certainly not straightforward. It's certainly complex. Some organizations have decided that in tracing the classification of their goods is far too costly, far too complicated, and what they're better off doing is just paying the tariff.
Okay.
So it's not as straightforward as originally thought.
Companies really have to do their homework on this particular issue.
Indeed.
What about the issue of immigration as it relates to skilled workers? Another big change.
Indeed, and particularly this, when I'm speaking to clients, has caught an awful lot of organizations as well by surprise. They're not really that aware of it. So if you're sourcing labor, and particularly within the sector of the UK and services sector of the UK, if you're sourcing EU labor for seasonality or for long-term prospects, there are a suite of charges that come now with facilitating that. So first of all, you have to be an immigration sponsor. There's a fee attached to that. I believe it's £1,456 just to become an immigration sponsor. Should you want to source your labor from the EU, and a lot of warehousing and logistics operations do that, both in the UK and here in Ireland, but it's particularly relevant for the UK, you're going to pay £1,000 for each person that you bring in now post the 1st of January. For organizations, particularly logistics, that are operating on very tight operational budgets, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of overhead. That's a lot of costs they wouldn't have potentially factored into their budgets. Mm-hmm. And that £1,000 only lasts for the first year. Every 6 months subsequently after that, it's £500. So again, if you're sourcing maybe 900 seasonal labour coming in from the EU from an agri sector perspective or a services sector perspective, that could be the tipping point between deciding to go with your EU labour. And the real piece then is, will there be shortages within the logistics industry?
Yeah, I would think that these are essential workers. You need to bring them in, because what are you going to replace them with? Yes. So you've got to go through the whole process. Yeah.
And this is the conundrum, and what shocked a lot of clients that I've spoken to about it. They just weren't prepared, for the bureaucracy. And if you have settled workers who are not UK nationals and are EU originally sourced, they must apply for the EU settlement scheme by June the 30th, or they can no longer work for you. So there's a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of administration, Rob, going on that organizations are only getting visibility about now.
Wow. Okay. Customs clearance and inspections. This is another big headache potentially. Tell me about that.
Indeed. And I read an interesting statistic, Rob, the other day, that 1 in 5 consignments or trailers is being sidelined because they don't have the correct customs clearance declarations and the correct customs clearance paperwork. That's a big capacity crunch on transport availability and container availability. And I've also read an article recently that there has been a big uptick in EU freight forwarders declining UK business, because of the complications around the customs clearance piece, around the complications of the T1s, where you have to have the guarantees for VAT and tariffs. So now what we're seeing is a real capacity crunch for bringing product to the UK. But the flip side of that, Rob, is that there is then coming back to Europe that also shrinks the capacity and the availability there. So I read an article there that told me that outlined that spot rates were up something like 47% compared to Q3 in 2020.
Spot
and
rates
these are huge costs
for transportation, you
for
mean?
freight forwarding.
For freight forwarding,
transportation.
Yeah.
For freight forwarding.
Okay.
So again, not being able to move your product, increased lead times, additional cost. It's pure disruption at the moment, unfortunately.
Are there steps that companies can take to mitigate the impact of these changes?
I'd love to have the silver bullet answer, Rob. I really would, but there's so much happening on a macro level that, organizations that were dealing with global trade seem to have handled the rules of origin piece so much better, because it was part of their day-to-day operations and they understood it. If you were working in that EU and trading and transporting product in that EU bubble, of which the UK was a part, then it's come as a complete shock. So again, some connections in terms of, I do find the gov.uk website very, very good in terms of giving good guardrails and good guidance around, how to manage your classifications, all of those pieces. So again, go to your gov.uk website and, access the many, many tools that are there to try and help you. In terms of the UK, the reluctance to go to the UK from EU freight forwarders and drivers as well also, Rob, they don't want to go because they're sitting waiting for hours to be processed through the customs clearance. Unless the customs clearance checks speed up their processes and make them simpler, and as organizations become more used to the customs clearance piece, it may settle down a little, but not in the immediate future. And then, of course, we have the two-tier piece, or the two-process piece, where the EU brought in full goods inspections, full customs clearance checks, the full suite bells and whistles of the UK no longer being in the EU, whereas the UK decided to go for a soft landing approach. And there's 3 particular windows. So if you're in controlled substances, in that vertical, all of your customs clearance declarations and checks and goods inspections came in on the 1st of January. For products of plant and animal origin, it's the 1st of April. And for everything else, it's the 1st of June. So I anticipate bumpy roads ahead, particularly across those 3 timelines. For Northern Ireland, the March deadline is the period where the period of grace ends. So again, you've got to navigate it as best you can, because an awful lot of the influencing factors are macro, and they're not something that is of your doing as a freight forwarder, as a shipper, or as a transport organization.
Do you think the UK stands to lose some logistics infrastructure because of all of these problems, that we'll see more of a migration of logistics to the continent, cutting out the UK altogether and using the Benelux countries, for instance, as distribution points? Of course, they have been all these years quite strongly. Will they even profit more from this change and cut out more UK activity?
There's a couple of pieces there, Rob, to be honest. There's a lot of avoidance. I believe that ferry traffic and transport from Ireland to use the UK land bridge back and forwards has decreased by 47%. There's a huge uptick increased route sailings between Cork, Rosslare and Dublin to Rotterdam, Le Havre and Bilbao. So they have already started to circumvent the UK land bridge, which is a shame because it is the speediest way to get your product to mainland Europe. In terms of that piece, yes, I see an avoidance of going to the UK. I've spoken to clients who have decided from their distribution centre perspective just to have it serve the UK. And they have redistributed whatever, there's a lot of distribution centres that did support the EU business and the EU network design. Now we see organisations moving their whatever was being serviced from the UK to the EU into their EU distribution centres and just having UK distribution centres to facilitate the UK to avoid all of that cross-border traffic and the disruption that's coming with it. So yes, we're seeing a significant shift in terms of where network design, particularly around distribution centres, warehousing, and how the transport is moving, avoiding that UK land bridge at the moment.
Well, considering how long we went through this period of transitional pain as they attempted to negotiate these Brexit exit strategies, I'm kind of surprised that companies are caught so unawares. And yet, Susan Boylan of Gartner, you've done a great service to us all by helping us to wake up and understand what some of the big considerations are, where companies need to go to get this information and get in line for the next 3 phases of this transition.
Yes,
Thank you so much for thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
Robert, you're very, very welcome. Pleasure to speak to you today. Take care.